G'day, mates. Today we're coming to you from the lost Caverns of Ixalan. We're on the trail of Xolatoyac, the Smiling Flood, a rare and beautiful creature. Look, up ahead, there's some tracks now. Oh, there she is, up ahead. Oh, blimey, look at that Sheila. What a beauty. She's a live one, isn't she? Let's go in for a closer look.
Greetings, Planeswalkers! How you doing? Welcome back to the Moot channel. The release of the Lost Caverns of Ixalan is right around the corner, and it's time to start exploring the commanders. So let's meet today's commander, Xolatoyac, the Smiling Flood, a SIMIC 6/6, 6-mana Salamander Serpent with enough text to scare your opponents. His first ability says, whenever Xolatoyac, the Smiling Flood, enters the battlefield or attacks, put a flood counter on target land. That land is an island in addition to its other types for as long as a flood counter is on it. There's a lot to unpack there, but there's more. His second ability, and I think his best ability, says, at the beginning of your end step, untap each permanent you control with a counter on it. Which doesn't take a genius to see that that ability is really good. Now I know what you're thinking, Moot, how are you going to break this SIMIC commander? No one has ever broken a SIMIC card before. You're right, SIMIC is a very strong color, and now we have a new toy to add to the pile. There's a lot of different ways to abuse this card, but today we're going to focus on a counter-heavy strategy that will focus on big creatures and then use our commander's ability to give them a pseudo-vigilance with lots of counter spells to remind our opponents to never invite us to a game again. The side strategy of the deck will abuse the fact that we get to basically hand out islands to our opponents and get extra islands for ourselves. Before we get started, this November on the 19th, I'm having a Thanksgiving special, and if you're a subscriber that lives in the US, you could win a commander deck if you tune in. As always, if you have a commander you want featured in its own video, leave it in the comments or join our Discord. Our first creature on the list is Ingenious Prodigy, a relatively new card that enters with X +1/+1 counters, and we can remove counters on our upkeep to draw an extra card. Armored Scrap Gorger puts oil counters on it, while also being a graveyard hate piece and mana dork. So it works pretty well with our commander as we can untap it on our end step. Core Tapper is our Platinum Swine of the deck as we can throw counters on artifacts and untap them on our end step with our commander's ability. And what's really cool is these are charge counters, meaning artifacts like Magistrate's Scepter work really well with the card. Goldberry River Daughter lets us move around counters and draw cards in that process. Gyre Sage is a mana dork that taps for more mana based on the +1/+1 counters on him. Hydroid Krasis is a good source of life and cards, and once we start going infinite, this is a good game finisher because the card also comes with Trample. Incubation Druid is another early game mana dork that gets better after you throw a +1 counter on it, but remember, it only needs one. Merfolk Skydiver is our infinite proliferate source once we've unlocked our mana. Scavenging Ooze is more graveyard hate that gets counters. Thrumming Bird to proliferate our counters, and while that might not be important for the flood counters, charge counters and +1 counters care greatly about proliferation. Arwen Weaver of Hope will throw down +1/+1 counters on our creatures when they ETB, plus if we get counters on Arwen, they get a lot bigger. Bloated Contaminator, which I promise our main intention is to use its proliferation, but Infect is not a bad byproduct of that process. Just know that when you play Infect at a table, it usually means you're not making any friends. Champion of Lampholt, because if you're playing a +1 counter deck, it's usually not far behind. Its ability to shut off blockers is one of the best things you can do in a +1 counter theme, so naturally it's going to go in the deck. Chasm Skulker can get big fast, and when it gets popped, we get a Squid Army for the trouble, plus we actually have a token doubler in the deck, so it gets a little bit better for that. Cold Eye Silky really loves our commander as we can give our opponents islands, making it unblockable, plus we play a lot of counters so we can pump its power to draw even more cards. Tommy of Whispered Hope is a Hardened Scale stapled onto a mana dork that has infinite potential for mana because we can make mana equal to its power when we tap it. Kodama the West Tree can ramp us, but more importantly, this card gives tramples to all modified creatures, and the +1 counters will make them modified. Mana Gorger Hydra to make the Joyer player think twice before storming off. Rishkar Pima Renegade to turn all our creatures into mana dorks, and again, we get to untap our mana dorks thanks to our commander. Thadadel has Island Walked with our commander, naturally that's pretty good, and we also get to steal important artifacts from other decks. Trigon Predator is a old classic that we'll use to keep our opponent's artifacts and enchantments at manageable levels. Boral of Hall Clad works really well with our charge counter artifacts, and it even works with our +1 counter strategy. Danny Pink will help us draw a lot of cards, and remember, he gives that ability to all our creatures, meaning they'll all draw a card when we put a +1 counter down. Fathom Mage is a combo piece, but it's also just an easy card draw engine in the deck. Forgotten Ancient gets big fast, but what really makes this card great is the fact that we get to distribute these counters on our upkeep to other creatures. Herald of Secret Streams, because who doesn't love dying on the spot to a removal check piece? If you didn't know, Herald will make our board unblockable, and usually in a big counters deck, our creatures are massive, so we'll kill you if we hit you, and Herald just makes it to where we'll always hit you. Master Biomancer is a good way to get counters on our creatures while also being a good target for counters itself. Defiler of Vigor discounts our green permanent spells for some life. And when we play green permanent spells, we throw +1 counters on all our creatures. Colonian Hydra, after one swing, will make our board a lethal threat. Murkring Leech to add to the untapped shenanigans of our deck while also being a lord for all the creatures we play. Draining Whelk is a sneaky tech that doesn't normally see the light of day, but basically we get a counter spell and then put +1 counters on it based on the spell's CMC, and it has flash, so it's a pretty sweet card that normally wouldn't see play. Gruff Triplets is a strange inclusion at first, but it's part of a sweet combo, and technically +1 counters is printed on the card, so don't worry, I'll show you the combo at the end. Vorinclex Monstrous Raider to turn off other counter decks and make our creatures huge, and our artifacts that care about charge counters, they go infinite really fast with this card out. Now for our spells, we have High Tide to make good use of all the islands that we could potentially make with our commander's first ability, then Swan Song to start our counters off, plus a 2/2 bird is not big enough when a lot of our creatures have trample. Counterspell is just a cheap card that lets us counter spells, plus the 2 islands doesn't matter too much as the lands that untap will be islands because they have flood counters on them. Cyclonic Rift will force some players to concede because we can do that in instant speed. Delay is another counter spell that buys time, and usually 3 turns is enough to close the game out. Mana Drain is another counter spell that we can use to ramp out our more expensive cards, but just know that the top end of our deck is at 6 mana. Thought Coming adds to the pile of counter spells. It's pretty useful because we can foretell it to make it a little bit cheaper, but what's really important about it is that we get to play Mind Games, because we're also playing Spectral Deluge, which is another card with foretell. It bounces all creatures our opponents control with toughness less than or equal to the amount of islands we control. Now our commander makes extra islands, so we should be able to play this for a pretty big number. For the artifacts and enchantments, we're playing a different ramp package than normal to make use of our commander's untap ability. So we have Astral Cornucopia, which has counters on it, and we play Proliferate, Everflowing Chalice for the exact same reason, and Soul Ring since our commander is 6 mana. We'll get there a little bit faster. Arcane Signet, and lastly Carpet of Flowers, because we hand out islands to our opponents if we want to. Plus, if there's a blue player at the table, then this card gets even better, as we can make a mana of any one color equal to the number of islands our opponents control. Now for everything else, we have Hardened Scales for the extra +1/+1 counters, Isochron Scepter because we can imprint a counter spell to annoy our opponents, and plus, if we use Core Tapper, we can put a charge counter on Isochron Scepter, and then with our commander we can untap at our end step. That way we have counterspell protection for our turn and our opponent's turn. Wizard class may seem like a strange include, but it has combo potential, and its last ability is not too bad even without the combo. Ozolith the Shattered Spire gives us more counters while also giving us a way to put counters on our creatures. Swiftfoot Boots for the protection and haste since our commander has an attack trigger. Fish Liver Oil to make one of our creatures unblockable as long as we control a flood counter and our commander, because remember, he gives the flood counter stat text. Simic Ascendancy is our non-combat win con, and it's yet another way to get counters down. Magistrate's Scepter is part of an infinite turn combo, but on its own with just our commander, it's every other turn, we'll get an extra turn. Bread for the Hunt is card draw, we just need to deal damage to our opponent. Hadana's Climb to put counters on creatures and then flip it so we can give evasion to a creature. Transmogrifying Wand is a removal piece that we can proliferate, and Core Tapper can put charge counters back on it if we run out of the counters. Hydra's Growth can make one of our creatures a lethal threat in just a few turns. Tribute to the World Tree puts counters on our smaller creatures, and our bigger creatures draw us cards. Lux Cannon is more removal, albeit pretty slow compared to a card like Transmogrifying Wand. Luckily though for us, Lux Cannon hits any permanent, and we have some acceleration to make this card come online a lot faster. Elven Chorus lets our creatures tap for any color of mana, and we can start playing cards off the top of our library. Greater Good is a combo piece, plus it's really good when a lot of your creatures are huge because we draw cards equal to its power. Doubling Season because we love extra counters, and the extra tokens helps a janky combo in our deck. For the Manabase, any old Simic lands will do, but feel free to copy the Manabase featured in the deck list found in the description of this video. My land recommendation is Vivid Grove and Creek, plus Blast Zone, as these lands naturally have counters on them so we can untap them. For the combo section, I'll go over one of the combos in the deck, but there are a few more for you to find on your own time. So for this combo, we need Gruff Triplets, Greater Good, and Doubling Season. To start, we'll need Greater Good and Doubling Season on the battlefield and Gruff Triplets in our hand. We'll play Gruff Triplets and make them Gruff Quintuplets. Then either give one of them haste or wait to swing with them for another turn. When we swing, we can sacrifice a Gruff token using Greater Good to draw a card, but more importantly, the rest of them get 6 +1/+1 counters, making them 9/9s with Trample. Then we can sack all but one to make a 135 power Trampler. Now remember, we'll also draw cards equal to their power, so we'll be drawing our entire deck. So just be sure you don't go crazy with sacking them unless you know you're down to one opponent. That's going to do it for today's deck, and I do hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know how I did or tell me about a card you'd like to add to the deck in the comments below. Subscribe or join to support the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.